Ah, you look tantalizing. You know, I make fun of The View a lot, but that's only because they keep talking. Because COVID also taught Sunny Hostin how to get her groceries delivered.
3 years, that's when I discovered Instacart. And I give them a big tip because they don't always pay their people well, and so that's been an issue, I think, for the company. But man, you can get toiletries, you can get fire logs.
Fire logs? She had to tell the audience that she tips big because even she knows she sounds insane.
The term woke has been, in my view, co-opted by the right and weaponized and bastardized. So I was surprised to hear you use the term because historically, as you know, because I think you're quite brilliant, that woke is a word used by the Black community to note that we must be aware of social injustices.
But words
and
migrate.
So why is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing, and originally that was absolutely a great thing. Don't tell me that the left hasn't changed. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was the conservatives who hated the Jews.
It all started like any other episode of The View: Bright Lights, smug smiles, and a table full of opinions waiting to spill over. But that day turned into a televised train wreck with front row seats. Picture this: Sunny Hostin, suited up in her usual tone of righteous wisdom, casually tossing out a take she clearly thought would earn applause. Instead, she got dragged hard, not just by one person, but by two very different voices who don't even usually agree on much. Greg Gutfeld came in first, cool and sharp with that signature smirk, like he already knew she was walking into her own disaster. Bill Maher followed, calm, steady, and ready to dismantle her talking points with the precision of someone who's been watching the nonsense build up for years. They didn't just argue, they exposed her. Not with shouting, but with facts and wit.
People have to wonder, where does Sunny Hostin get her opinions? Like you said, and it's obviously from her husband. She has to tell her what to say in The View, because without it, she's got nothing up there. She's not very bright. So, but the problem with her is that
If I had any doubt that I was right about the change that's happened in the left, watching people protest for a terrorist organization like Hamas, that straightened me up pretty quick.
You can see the way Sunny Hostin, the way she's touching her above her eye, and she can't even look at him because she's an activist, not a journalist or whatever it is that she purports.
What made it brutal was how unprepared Sunny looked. She froze mid-sentence, her face flickering between confusion and denial. The kind of moment where someone realizes the script in their head doesn't match reality. And still, she pushed on, doubling down instead of backing off. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now let's continue. Because what happened next wasn't just awkward, it was public intellectual demolition. And the worst part? It had only just begun. Sunny tried to recover, tried to bring some weight to the conversation by dropping the word woke, expecting it to land like a mic drop. Instead, it backfired instantly.
it's about The View. It's become like a medical hospital that displays human misfailure. Like, it's like here, let's look at this political oddity. You know, it's like, it really is like the left-wing equivalent of a carnival sideshow, except instead of bearded ladies and fat clowns and two-headed cows. Well, let me rephrase that. But The View is a victim of the sunk cost fallacy.
She claimed the word had been hijacked by the right, twisted from its original meaning rooted in Black activism. But Maher wasn't buying it. He calmly shot back, not denying its origins, but pointing out how the modern use of woke has become a joke even to people who once supported it. He didn't mock the term. He mocked what it's become. And it hit hard. Maher reminded everyone that somewhere along the way, the fight for justice turned into a game of who can be the loudest about being offended. And right then, the energy shifted. You could see it on the faces around the table. Even Sunny's co-hosts looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Greg leaned back, grinning. He didn't even need to jump in. Sunny was already unraveling. She tried to keep control, but it was slipping. Her defense turned into an awkward rant about tipping Instacart drivers and buying fire logs. Fire logs! In a conversation about political language. And that's when it hit everyone. This wasn't someone presenting strong ideas. It was someone fumbling for validation, trying to cover the cracks in her logic with emotional noise. But Greg and Bill weren't having it. They'd seen that act before, and this time, they came with receipts.
Speak the truth, and when for years you've been telling lie after lie after lie, now you're carrying this big bag of rocks around you because it's too harmful for their ego to admit that we really were dishonest. And they could be honest. All they would have to say is, look, we hate Trump so much. We were willing to lie about Joe Biden because we felt he was preferable. We thought our lying and our cover-up was on your behalf. Just say that. You're still scum, but at least you're honest.
Then came the moment that really made the internet light up. Maher didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He dropped one sentence that cut deeper than any insult. "Don't tell me the left hasn't changed." That was it. The whole studio went still for a beat. Sunny blinked, looking like someone had just unplugged her mid-monologue. Maher continued, pointing out how the same people who once fought for truth and free speech were now the ones trying to silence others for disagreeing. Greg jumped in right after, calling The View what he said it had become: a political sideshow, not a place for real discussion, but a stage for empty drama. He called it a hospital for human misfailure. Harsh? Sure. But nobody could really argue when Sunny's entire argument had just melted into random stories and vague feelings. At one point, Sunny physically couldn't look Maher in the eye. She kept adjusting her face, rubbing her brow, as if she was trying to teleport out of the conversation. But there was nowhere to go. Because now the spotlight was on Herond, not the kind she wanted.
If you think that's bad, The View's co-host, Sunny Hostin, says, "Hold my beer," and is literally claiming Republican women can't think for themselves.
I think that women, white women in particular, want to protect this patriarchy here because it's to their benefit. They want to make sure that their husbands do well. They want to make sure that their sons do well. They want to make sure that their children do well. And they want to make sure that they do well. Most of the women in some of these studies are married white women, and they do fall in line with what their husband.
And this wasn't just about her opinions. This was about how unprepared she was when challenged by people who weren't afraid to push back. For once, the applause didn't come, just awkward silence and a couple of stunned faces trying not to make eye contact. That's when things turned from uncomfortable to unforgettable. Greg, never one to hold back, took a swing so direct it stunned even the audience. He said Sunny doesn't form her own opinions, she gets them from her husband. Then he added, she's not very bright. It was brutal. The kind of comment that would have triggered a fiery comeback from anyone with a strong argument to stand on. But Sunny? She just sat there, frozen. Maher, meanwhile, brought it right back to real-world stakes. He talked about watching people protest in support of Hamas, a known terrorist group, and how that moment made him realize the left really had changed. He didn't yell or rant. He just laid out the facts, and it was clear. This wasn't about party lines anymore. This was about how dangerous blind ideology can get. Sunny tried to pivot, but it only made things worse. She wasn't debating, she was retreating behind activist slogans and buzzwords. And Greg called it out immediately. He said she's not a journalist. She's an activist pretending to be one. The room got tense. But the truth was hanging in the air. This wasn't two men attacking a woman on TV. This was two seasoned commentators exposing how performative, shallow, and disconnected the conversation on The View had become, and how Sunny was the perfect symbol of that mess.
Hostin's obsession with race gets thrown back in her face. Today's video comes to us from Sunny Hostin. Sounds like a town. We're in Sunny Hostin. She was on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show dedicated to researching celebrity ancestry. For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners from Europe. Here's how she took the news. Roll it.
And just when you thought it couldn't get any more cringe, Sunny started unloading takes like she was trying to win a trophy for most out-of-touch person on television. She began tossing out half-baked opinions that sounded like they were scraped from the first page of Google 5 minutes before the show. She didn't just show up with opinions, she brought an entire buffet of microwaved hot takes, all served with a smug smile and the energy of someone who thinks being loud equals being right. She started talking like a motivational speaker at a PTA meeting, lots of passion, zero substance. Greg and Bill, they weren't even debating anymore. They were just sitting back, watching her logic collapse like a folding chair under pressure. You could almost see it in real time, Sunny throwing out dramatic statements, desperately fishing for applause that never came. And the craziest part? She still acted like she was winning. Her delivery was full of confidence, but the content? Empty. She jumped from brunch stories to systemic injustice to oat milk, inflation, none of it connected. It wasn't analysis, it was performance. Bill looked at her like a teacher listening to a student who clearly didn't read the book. Greg? He didn't need to say much. One raised eyebrow, one sarcastic grin, and Sunny's entire monologue sounded like a parody of itself. Then came the moment that took the entire room from awkward to jaw-dropping. Sunny dropped a take so wild it didn't just flop, it face-planted. She said that having a nuanced conversation was a form of privilege. Yes, according to her, if you can calmly discuss complex issues, you're probably too privileged to understand real struggles. The logic was so upside down, it felt like she was trying to cancel common sense. Bill didn't even blink. He hit her back with a single line.
Here's a treat for you. The insufferable Sunny Hostin getting a beatdown from Bill Maher on Gaza.
We're all concerned about the innocent civilians that have been collectively punished and murdered, largely children and women. And are you at all concerned about the fact that the International Criminal Court just today issued a subpoena for Bibi Netanyahu?
Well, that's ridiculous, but it's a war.
Why?
Because it's a war, and they were attacked, and they're defending themselves. Now, this is a war. Do you think Hamas needs to be destroyed? This is the question.
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
So how can we do that with a ceasefire?
All right. So Hamas needs to be destroyed because they are a terrorist organization who say openly that they want to commit genocide on the Jewish people.
Reality doesn't come with a prerequisite course in personal trauma. That shut it down completely. No screaming, no insults, just facts. And once again, Sunny had nothing. No reply. Just more blinking. At this point, it was clear what her strategy was. If your experience matched hers, you were wise. If it didn't, you were wrong, uninformed, or her favorite accusazione supporter of the patriarchy. The conversation wasn't about understanding, it was about dominating. If she couldn't win the argument, she'd flip the rules. Experience mattered unless your experience contradicted her worldview. Then suddenly, you didn't count. And the more she spoke, the worse it got. Her logic flipped and flopped like a yoga instructor on caffeine. 1 minute she was outraged, the next a victim. And behind her, a trail of broken arguments dressed up like activism. It wasn't debate, it was chaos in a designer outfit. Then came the Gaza moment. Sunny, in her most serious tone, launched into a dramatic plea about innocent civilians, women and children, and how Israel's actions were collective punishment. She mentioned the International Criminal Court issuing a subpoena for Netanyahu, expecting nods of agreement. But Maher wasn't playing along. Without blinking, he cut straight to the core. It's a war. They were attacked. They're defending themselves. Then he asked the one question Sunny clearly wasn't ready for. Do you think Hamas needs to be destroyed? She hesitated, stammered, then finally said yes, and just like that, everything she'd said before crumbled. If Hamas needs to be destroyed, how do you argue for a ceasefire while calling Israel's defense an overreaction? The contradiction hit like a punch to her own argument. Greg didn't even have to say much. His tone was the responsatory, sarcastic, and dripping with that smug, "I told you so" energy. While Sunny scrambled for a moral high ground, Greg looked like he'd just been handed a free pass to roast her. No effort needed. It wasn't a debate anymore. It was a spiral. Sunny had handed over her entire argument like a wrapped gift, and Maher and Gutfeld opened it, smiled, and revealed it was empty.
I make fun of The View a lot, but that's only because they keep talking. Those hens are always clucking. They get to say stupid stuff for an hour every day, and then I get to say stupid stuff for an hour every day, except on purpose. But every now and then, one of those dingbats inadvertently says something that reveals modern liberal thought so perfectly it deserves further study. You know, like a weird serpent that washed up on the beach and you want to...
The woman who came in ready to lecture was now stuck trying to explain how her own logic didn't collapse under the weight of her emotions. Just when it seemed like Sunny couldn't sink further, she pulled out another grenade, this time aimed at Republican women. She claimed that white women, especially married ones, want to protect the patriarchy because it benefits them. According to her, they vote the way their husbands want, so the whole family can succeed. The table went silent, not because it was deep, because it was insane. She wasn't just accusing women of being politically wrong, she was calling them brainwashed housewives clinging to their husbands' coattails. Greg's reaction? He didn't yell, he didn't argue. He just tilted his head like he was watching a car crash in slow motion. The look said everything. Did she really just say that on live TV? Maher didn't even need to respond. The statement had already buried itself. It was the kind of comment that doesn't spark dialogue, it just shuts people down. And that's exactly what Sunny's been doing all along, turning disagreement into moral judgment, debate into accusations. And here's the truth, she didn't want a conversation, she wanted a standing ovation. She wanted claps, nods, and gasps of admiration. Instead, she got blank stares and polite horror. She wasn't sharing insight, she was scolding the world for not being as enlightened as she thinks she is. And still, she didn't back down, because in her mind, being loud is being right. Even when the whole room is silently wondering how someone so educated can be so confidently wrong. And now we hit the part that's almost tragic, because on paper, Sunny should be winning. She's a lawyer, a journalist. She's got a resume stacked with big titles and big platforms. But instead of leaning into facts or real experience, she leans straight into identity. Every issue becomes a monologue. Every disagreement turns into a sermon. She doesn't exchange ideas, she shuts them down. Her go-to move is to label opposition as dangerous or oppressive, and pretend her own views are untouchable truth. Greg and Maher, they didn't even coordinate. They didn't need to. It was like watching two completely different predators zero in on the same weak spot. Greg, with his grinning snark, poking holes with sarcasm. Maher, the cynical philosopher, calmly dissecting each statement like he was doing it out of sheer boredom. It wasn't bullying, it was exposure. Sunny's takes couldn't survive outside of her echo chamber. Without a room full of yes women and applause signs, the logic behind her arguments wilted fast. She claimed to be the voice of reason, but her whole delivery was performance art. Her version of activism was all buzzwords and facial expressions, but no actual solutions. You could practically see Greg holding back laughter and Maher resisting the urge to just walk off set. Because deep down, they both knew this wasn't a debate. It was a rescue mission. They were trying to save the conversation from collapsing completely under the weight of Sunny's own words. It kept going. Sunny, arms folded, chin up, still convinced she was winning the room. But the applause she was waiting for never came. Because now it was obvious this wasn't someone defending an idea. It was someone performing for approval that never arrived. Greg didn't even try anymore. He just let her talk. Every sentence she spoke came wrapped in emotional buzzwords and packaged like a TED Talk for people who think Instagram infographics count as education. When she brought up systemic injustice, Greg calmly pointed out her massive salary. That's when everything stopped. She called herself the voice of the unheard, and the room practically fell silent not because they were inspired, but because everyone was probably thinking the same thing. Who exactly asked you to speak for them? Sunny wasn't debating, she was delivering a one-woman show, and the script was full of holes. Her strategy? Say things loud enough and with enough outrage and hope no one asks follow-up questions. But Greg and Maher were full of questions, and they weren't letting anything slide. Her logic couldn't stand, and her confidence couldn't cover it. She was trying to carry a message built on shaky ideas, and it was collapsing in real time. Maher didn't need to shout. He just watched it unravel, like someone quietly observing a house of cards fall over from a light breeze. And just before the final blow landed, the chaos hit its peak. Sunny, still clinging to the idea that she was leading some kind of intellectual revolution, started shifting gears at lightning speed like she was trying to outrun her own contradictions. One moment she was talking about race, the next about brunch, then about climate justice, then somehow landed on the price of organic eggs. It was like she had a wheel of buzzwords in her head and just kept spinning it, hoping one of them would land with emotional impact. But none of it stuck, because Greg and Maher weren't reacting the way she expected. They weren't shocked, they weren't offended, they were amused. Watching, waiting. She started explaining systemic oppression by referencing grocery shopping habits. Literally, she brought up oat milk and yogurt and said prices reflect deeper injustice. She spoke like she was narrating a self-help podcast for rich college kids who think tweeting is activism. And Greg? He leaned in, smirking, barely lifting a finger. Just one sarcastic jab, one eyebrow raise, and the whole illusion crumbled. It wasn't just what she was saying, it was how she was saying it. That voice, that tone. Condescending, performative, like she was teaching a lesson to a room full of toddlers who just didn't get it. At one point, she tried to tie capitalism, racism, and dietary preferences into a single thought and called it political commentary. It was like watching someone confidently walk into a glass door, then blame the building. Her monologues weren't thoughtful, they were dramatic readings from a script made of Twitter threads and protest signs. And what made it all worse? She believed it. Every word, every dramatic pause, every sentence filled with overacted outrage. She truly believed she was educating the audience when really, she was just burying herself deeper. Maher picked up on it immediately. He didn't need jokes. He just sprinkled reality like salt across her entire argument. No theatrics, no yelling. Just lines like, "The emperor has no clothes," and it hit. You could feel it. Sunny never paused to self-reflect, never admitted she might be wrong. Instead, she powered through, like shouting louder could rewrite the facts. Her opinions weren't just flawed, they were inflexible. Wrapped in emotion, dressed in moral superiority, and held together by double standards. Greg called it perfectly when he said she was performing activism. And that's exactly what it was, an act, designed for claps, not clarity. And the wildest part? Maher and Gutfeld weren't even trying to destroy her. They were trying to keep the entire show from sinking under the weight of her own logic. It wasn't a takedown, it was damage control. And Sunny, completely unaware, just kept going, arms crossed, voice raised, still waiting for the applause that never came. And then came the final hit, the one that didn't just sting, it exposed everything. Bill leaned back, calm as ever, and asked, "How can someone claim to be open-minded while canceling anyone who dares to think differently?" No yelling, no theatrics, just a question so sharp, so direct, it sliced through all the noise. And Sunny, nothing. No comeback, no witty line, just silence. But not the thoughtful kind, the kind that happens when someone's been hit with a truth they can't dance around. And yet, she kept smiling, still spinning, still trying to reframe the wreckage like it was a win. Her logic? Gone. Her confidence? Still there somehow. Like watching someone standing in the ruins of their own argument, insisting they built a mansion. Maher and Gutfeld didn't need to celebrate. The silence did the work for them. They looked like two guys who accidentally showed up to the same roast and realized halfway through they didn't need to lift a finger. Sunny was doing the job herself. By the end, she was still trying to act like the moral compass of America, preaching empathy while offering none, demanding tolerance while shutting down anyone who dared to disagree. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.